Hi, this is Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts, and welcome to another edition of the Nebraska Way, where it's all about how Nebraska is growing and more. And this episode, we've got another great guest, Trev Alberts, who's the athletic director for the University of Nebraska. And obviously, University of Nebraska sports are a big deal in Nebraska, so we're very excited to have you here. And Trev, as always, I'm going to go through your bio and kind of give people a little highlight. Then we're going to talk about some of the fluffy background stuff, and then we're going to get into the tough questions.
All right. I'll do my best, Governor.
All right, good. All right. So, obviously, you're the vice chancellor of the athletics at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. So they wrote down like,
we don't know
veteran
what that means,
administrator, veteran administrator, but we'll get into that in a second. Okay, so I'm going to skip some of this other stuff because I want to get into the juicy stuff. But so you were Nebraska's first Butkus Award winner in 1993 when you helped Tom Osborne make an Orange Bowl appearance against Florida State. That's pretty cool, right?
It was wonderful, yeah. Charlie McBride was our defensive coordinator, and I benefited from a great scheme and a bunch of great players around me.
Cool. And then, but you were also a first-team All-American by every major publication in 1993. You also made Big 8 Male Athlete of the Year, Big 8 Defensive Player of the Year, and Football News National Defensive Player of the Year. Your number 34 jersey was retired at the 1994 Red-White Spring Game. In 2015, you were elected to the College Football Hall of Fame. So that was a pretty good career college, right? Mm-hmm. And then off the field, you earned NCAA's highest honor, the Today's Top 6 Award. You're also a three-time academic All-Big 8 honoree. You graduated from University of Nebraska before your senior citizen, because I'm kind of an overachiever there. You were a fifth pick in the 1994 NFL draft by the Indianapolis Colts.
And that's where I was an underachiever.
And there you were an underachiever. Well, I saw you were there until 1996, so you had to be okay to get there that far. And then you went on TV as an analyst for college and pro football games on several sports networks. And then, of course, came back to Nebraska, where you're the athletic director at the University of Nebraska-Omaha, and helping them through a transition to Division I sports with hockey, right?
Yep.
So moving on from football and wrestling into hockey. So tough decision there. So you're used to tough decisions. We'll get to those later. Your wife, Angie, how long have you and Angie been married?
26 years.
26 years. You got 3 kids.
Yep.
Chase,
Ashton, and Brianna.
And now Chase is married, right?
Chase is married to Cassie.
Okay, so now how old is Chase?
Chase is 25.
Okay, and how old are Ashton and Brianna?
Ashton is 22, and Brianna is a freshman in college. So
so you're almost empty nesters. You're getting there.
We're empty nesters.
Well, she's going to come back from college. Just so
well, yeah, I mean, okay, we only have one left on the payroll.
Are you still paying the cell phone bills?
Oh, yes.
You're not empty nesters yet, because as long as you're paying a cell phone bill, they're liable to come home.
Good point.
All right. But you're not from Nebraska originally, right? You're from Iowa.
Yep.
So let's take us back to, where you're from in Iowa. How did you decide on Nebraska, and a little bit about your Nebraska career?
Yeah, I grew up in Cedar Falls, Iowa, and both my mom and dad grew up as farm kids in northeast Iowa. And my dad met my mom, my late mother, Linda, and at a church Bible conference.
Cool.
Always he was the only boy in the family, and so grandfather worked his whole life to be able to have a farm to give to his son and to continue on the farming tradition. And my lovely mother informed him, I'm interested in you as well, but I don't want to be a farmer's wife. And so my dad panicked as a senior in high school and ended up going to the University of Northern Iowa and got his accounting degree. And so it was a really interesting upbringing. My dad was the general manager of the Cedar Falls Utility Company, but also we farmed on the side. And so when my grandfather got sick and unfortunately died at an early age,
I'm sorry.
Our sort of upbringing was we lived in Cedar Falls, we lived in town, and then after school and on Saturdays we ran out 35 miles to the farm and did a corn and soybeans farm, and then we had a tenant who farrowed hogs, and so felt like I kind of had the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
I got both experiences.
So how'd you pick University of Nebraska?
Well, we grew up, and it's hard for me to say this sometimes, but we were diehard Iowa Hawkeye fans. And I will tell you, part of the reason for that is because when Hayden Fry came, Iowa football was really at a low point.
Right.
And he really embraced agriculture in the state of Iowa. And, probably it's well known about the American Needs Farmers on their helmets. And that meant a lot to my dad, and because he was very proud of our agricultural roots. And I always intended and thought, gosh, if I could ever go to Iowa. I mean, we were big enough fans, we actually took the family van and drove to Atlanta to go to a bowl game, the Peach Bowl, just as a family. But, was recruited by Iowa, but Nebraska at that point was just at a totally different level.
We were a top 5 program.
Yeah, we were trying to get to the national championships and play and win a national championship. But really, ultimately, it was one person.
Tom Osborne came and recruited you? Yeah.
And just the way he carried himself, his values, what he believed in. It was pretty obvious that football was really important to the state of Nebraska, and that meant a lot to me as well.
So did he come visit you?
He did.
And so what was that like? So when he came to your house, like, was your mom and dad there? Was it just you?
Well, the truth of the matter is, Nebraska was, it seemed so far out of reach for me as a student athlete, and they came kind of late into the recruiting game, that when John Melton, the late John Melton, who was a linebacker coach, he actually recruited me. When he came to Cedar Falls and told my family that they would like to offer me a scholarship, we didn't believe him. And my dad,
really? Trev's not that good.
my dad said, "Well, if Nebraska's really serious about Trev, wouldn't Coach Osborne come in?"
Oh man!
So 2 days later, Coach Osborne and Ron Brown came to Cedar Falls, and of course my parents were so excited, and we went to it's not there anymore, but there was a restaurant called the Broom Factory, and my mom had it all set up, and we had a red and white tablecloth, and I think we were recruiting them as much as they were recruiting me. But so yeah, he came to Cedar Falls and was in our home, and I remember taking a picture in front of the fireplace. I was pretty small in those days, and there was Ron Brown, Tom Osborne, and me, and I was the smallest of the 3.
Wow.
And it looked a little odd that they were recruiting me to play football, but just unique.
Especially on the defense.
Especially on the defense. But it was really one of Coach Osborne's signature gifts, I think, was to be able to identify not where you were today, but project with our development program at Nebraska.
Where could you be?
Where could you be?
Yeah.
And so I would say, if you look today, I'm not sure that I would be recruited, or a guy like Terry Keneally, to some of these programs, because we wouldn't be on list.
Right.
We wouldn't have those stars because we weren't developed. But Nebraska had a really, singular focus around development and talent identification, and they sold us. And what Coach Osborne sold me on, Pete, was if you come to Nebraska, every single component of your student athlete experience, everything, we have a plan for, we have people for, and we have resources for. All you have to do is work.
Oh,
and
okay.
if you're willing to work,
right.
You'll max out.
Yeah.
Athletically,
and for a farm
academically.
kid, right? Or kind of a farm kid, part-time farm kid.
I knew how to work.
You knew how to work, exactly.
I like to work.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, wow. And my experience was everything he told me was actually true. It was authentic, it was real, and I could believe him. And there were a lot of us that had an opportunity to look back and say, wow, I ended up maxing out in those key areas like academics and not just football, but life skills and those things outside that have a much broader impact for you as you move forward in life. And so that's, the things that I'm telling, prospective student athletes now across the board. And because it's evolved, now we have mental health, right? We have the NAPL, we have nutrition. There's so many more components to that experience. But I believe the University of Nebraska is positioned to continue to be able to, in a real and genuine way, make that commitment to prospective student athletes.
Cool. Very good.
Yeah.
So obviously you were a force on the black shirts, but you didn't start out that way, right?
No.
So
I tried to transfer.
You tried to transfer? What
Well,
happened?
It happens to every student athlete. The reality is that the tough transition is you're a star in high school.
Right.
You're probably the biggest guy in the team.
Right.
You're stronger, you're faster, you're tougher, and so it comes a little bit more naturally. And when you go to a place like Nebraska, I was 9th team right outside linebacker when I got here.
Wow.
Remember, we had that walk-on program
Yeah.
where you had guys that maybe weren't quite as tall or quite as fast, but they'd been in the system 3 years, and so their strength, and I was 6'4", 209 pounds. We didn't even have a weight room in my high school. And I got through my freshman year, and I just wanted to play so bad, and there was so much talent in that room. And I asked for a meeting, with Coach Osborne, and I just said, Coach, I just want you to be honest with me. I mean, am I good enough to play here? And it's fine if I'm not. I'm not offended. I just have 4 years to play a game
Right.
I love, and I
I want to actually be on the field.
I want to be on the field. And he said, well, Trev, you did just get Big 8 Freshman of the Year. I think you can play. And so I just needed that affirmation from him that, that I could continue to grow. And so we all go through that. You have to make a decision. I went through it. It was one night after training, after our study table. It was about 9:30, pitch dark, and I'm walking through the stadium on the way back to Abel Hall. 903 Abel Hall is where I stayed, and I said to myself, I'm not sure if I'm ever going to play here or whether I can do it, but I just committed to doing everything I could and paying the price necessary to be successful. But every student athlete goes through that because it's hard.
Yeah.
It really is.
Right, absolutely. So you just talked about a story with Coach Osborne. Are there other stories that stick out to you, or lessons that he taught you personally, or personal stories you have about Coach Osborne?
He wasn't. It was just his walk, Pete. I think the thing I appreciated most about him was he was who he purported to be. And you're better off just be who you are, even if don't try to be somebody else. And when he told us things, it actually happened. He was very real, very authentic. But I was scared to death of him. And he never yelled.
Well, he never yells.
He never yelled at anybody. I was never cursed at once in my, not by him, as a coach. But his attention to detail and his singular focus on discipline in everything we did, you wouldn't dare be 2 minutes late to a team meeting, and not that anybody yell at you, but when the room stopped and he looked at you, it was just this feeling of not wanting to let him down.
Right.
And I think it was just the way he lived his personal life that it was pretty hard to emulate, and he just had just this genuine respect and admiration. He was paying the price personally in that role, and it made the rest of us motivated to try to, to do a similar effort.
Cool. So obviously, like I said, you went on to become a black shirt, major force on the defense. What were some of the lessons that came out of that program that you were then able to apply, like life lessons, that you were able to apply down the road in your career, not just in the the nuts and bolts of football, but just the nuts and bolts of life?
Well, unity of purpose. There was a very clearly communicable vision around everything we were doing. Everybody knew what their role was, and everybody was accountable to that role. And that wasn't just the football team. Mm-hmm. Everybody who touched football, it's kind of interesting as we're going through what we're going through now. I've been reaching out to some colleagues and coaches who aren't candidates, but just who I respect of how they've built. And there's a similar theme to that. Yeah. And the successful ones have a very clearly communicable vision. And everybody who touches football is involved in that sort of, collective vision. And every one of those people are valued. And, Coach did such a tremendous job of, it didn't matter if you were the custodian who cleaned the locker room for, everybody felt like if they were part of the team.
Yeah.
And if they didn't perform their role at an elite level and a high level, we weren't going to be successful as a team. And so I thought that was really, really important, the unity of purpose. Work ethic, we talked often about being willing to pay a bigger price than the other person. How important is this to you? Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, talent is a real issue. But so many times in life, we may have a few people like you, Pete, who are way up here. But,
no, actually, I never played football at the college level.
Well,
even high school level, for that matter.
But just in our society, you might have some people that have been gifted by God in areas that maybe a lot aren't. But the reality is the vast majority of us comes down to work ethic and what price are you willing to pay and how important is it to you and how disciplined are you in, living out your values every day, because we all are challenged, with will we stay true to what we purport to believe in. So it was those types of things that, Coach was just so good at. And he's just tough. He's a tough person. Yeah. And I'm, not so much physically tough, but his mental toughness, his consistency, I would say, is a big word. He was the same person every single day. And it's a hard example to live up to, but it's something that's been very meaningful to me.
Yeah, cool. So then you got drafted by the Colts.
Yeah.
Tell me about that experience.
Well, that was an interesting experience. We came from a place like Nebraska where there was such a commitment to serving young people. Whether it be the the training table, strength and conditioning, every single area. And when I got to the NFL, and it's a lot different now. It's unfair to say this about the Colts now,
Right.
But there were certain organizations back in those days that just hadn't made the commitment.
Right. To
And-
not understand that the people are the most valuable resource.
That's exactly right. And so, you found yourself, there was an indoor practice facility. So there's a little piece of turf, and here you are, it's a blizzard out there. And I remember going in my rookie year, 8 games into the season, and my knee pad had a hole in it. And I asked for a new knee pad, and they said, well, I'm sorry, we're out of those, and we won't be getting any more this year. So you'll just have to. So it's just a totally different
A
commitment.
professional team?
You go
Holy
into the
cow,
weight
yeah.
room, and there was a chalkboard, and the strength coach would, well, at Nebraska, it was all computerized. There was a lot of
Right.
science, and, and it just was shocking to me.
That is stunning, though, that a
It was,
professional
yeah.
football team, which presumably would have the resources to, say, have computers or knee
Well, they
pads
certainly
and
do
just
now.
kind of basic stuff like knee pads, right? I mean, now I'm sure, right, it's different.
Oh,
but-
it's totally different, and the Colts are a really well-run organization. But in those days, it was just a little bit different. And so it felt like, and for me, what was hard was football was never a business. Football was a game that I loved to play with a group of guys that I cared about. That was the other thing that Coach and Coach McBride were really good at,
Yeah.
is helping you understand about playing for the person next to you.
Yeah.
You're not just playing for yourself, but you can't let Pete down, who's standing next to you in a three technique. And at the NFL, I can just tell you a story. My first game I went into, I didn't get signed until about 10 days into camp. So the first preseason game that I played in, I'd only been to camp for 3 days. And so my coach said, do you want to start? Or, first of all, I'd never been asked if I wanted to start. Normally the coach tells you what you'll be
Right.
doing. But I remember I said, I went in the second quarter, and I ran in excited, and in college, and I don't even know what I said, but let's go. And I was kind of excited, and I won't say his name, but a gentleman who had in his 13th year in the league
Okay, rookie.
looked at
Right.
down and he said, "Shut up, rookie.
Yeah.
Just do your job."
Yeah.
So it was a different feel, and
Right. That's not exactly a team building comment to make.
so but that's the NFL. The NFL is a business. It's not for long. That's what it stands for. NFL,
Yeah,
not
there
for
you go,
long.
Not for long, right?
And
What's
so
the-
you
what's
go
the
in
average
there-
career is 4 years,
It's 3.5.
3.5. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a difficult, it's a man's game, and I didn't transition well at all.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that would be tough. And actually, you mentioned about the Colts, and I was just thinking back on our experience with the Cubs, and it was kind of the same thing, actually. If you look at the facilities the Cubs had, University of Nebraska was way better than what we had. Now, obviously, we spent $40 million just on the clubhouse to be able to upgrade it. But it was the same sort of thing. It's like, how can you expect these people to be world champions
Right.
if you don't have world-class facilities? I mean, that's
Yeah.
where it starts. You got to start treating your people like they're world-class if you want them to behave world-class.
That's exactly right. And you don't get to pick and choose excellence, do you?
Right,
You get to
exactly.
say, well, we're going to be excellent here in the clubhouse. You make a commitment of overall excellence, or you're not going to be excellent in any area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, you played till '96,
Mm-hmm.
and then you went into broadcasting. So how did that jump make?
Well, first I met my wife there.
Oh,
which
you
was
met
wonderful.
playing for the Colts.
Yep. So
I forgot. I was going to get to Angie,
Yeah,
but okay.
yeah, sorry. I have to. I'm learning, after 26 years. But she was just finishing law school in Indiana. She's a
Well, tell the story,
IU,
because she didn't really like you at first.
Yeah, no. And I had never been on a blind date in my life, but I had met, her name was Jenny, this person that actually was dating someone on the team, and she was asking me questions about my background, and she goes, "Well, I have someone for you." And I'm not interested in the blind. I said,
Right.
no. She grew up on a farm in Indiana. I think you guys would be great. She's just finishing law school. And I was like, oh, that. And so I did summon up the courage to call her. Angie said, "Hey, thank you. Jenny told me you might be calling. I really appreciate it. I'd love to talk to you, but I'm
super
studying
busy
for the
right
bar
now."
exam. So if you can just give me 6 weeks and call me
Well, hey,
back.
that's better than washing your hair, right?
Well, that's true.
I mean, the
And-
bar is a legit excuse.
It was legit. And
Yeah.
by the way, she passed the bar, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But
There's a lot of stress involved.
there a lot of stress, and but I was, humiliated even further, Pete. I mean, not only was I being a bad football player on the field, but now this person won't even talk to me. But in the end, we
Like,
ended
hey,
up.
don't you know I'm a football player?
She didn't really care about that. So people love that story. But so we finished up, and then After about my third year.
Wait, so she took the bar, and then she agreed to go out with you?
Yes, she did.
Okay.
In fact, she brought the piece of mail over to my house because you have to wait for a period of time, and to hear from the bar if you pass the exam.
Right. Oh, she wanted to
And
wait
so
till she got the bar notice back before she would go out to
Well,
me?
no, we were kind of dating at that point.
Oh, okay.
But I just remember when she brought that to the house, she opened it in front of me.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was a very thin thing, and she thought that was going to be a letter that basically said, you didn't pass
Like
the bar.
F.
But
Yeah.
actually, it was that she passed. So, then I had this illustrious 3-year career in the NFL where I think I am still in most of the top flops of all time lists. If you Google, I'm not real proud of that. But in the end, after I had my right elbow and both shoulders reconstructed, my wife said to me, "Isn't there something else you can do? This seems kind of dumb." And so that kind of started the process of looking for alternate options career-wise.
And so you went looking for broadcasting. Is that fair?
No, I didn't. I actually moved back to Lincoln. Didn't really know what to do. I met with Coach Osborne, had lunch at the training table, and I tell this to people a lot. I mean, I think people miss, when the cheering stops. I think about that a lot. We lift up our student athletes at Nebraska, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think we forget a little bit about when the cheering stops. And if there would be anybody that would be very well positioned to transition, I would. I came from a great family. I had a great education, had a wonderful, supportive wife. It was a tough time.
Yeah.
Because as you quote fail, it's the first time I failed at that level in athletics. We came back to Lincoln. We bought a house here in Williamsburg, and met with Coach Osborne. I said, I don't really know what I want to do, and thought about coaching, and he said no. So I don't know if he knew I'd be a terrible coach or what, but he said, I don't think that'd be good for you, Trev. He said, you're a family guy, and football coaching is not for family people.
I don't think people appreciate.
I don't think they appreciate it.
The level of commitment it takes to be a football coach. How many hours? It's not like, I just show up in August and we put together some plays and then we work hard during the season, but I get to January and I'm off. It's not that at all. I mean, the whole thing, it never stops.
Our whole staff is essentially out right now recruiting.
Yeah.
So we have an off week, and people think, well, they can catch up with their family.
Yeah.
So when they are here, they're not here at home very often. And so he helped, and I actually took a job at NBC Bank.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I was just getting started in institutionalized investments and learning, and I got a phone call from Jim Walton, who's the president of CNN, and they said that they were starting this network called CNN Sports Illustrated.
Yeah.
That was going to be they were going to start a college football show, and he wanted to know if I would audition. And I said, no, I'm not interested in that. I don't know how to do broadcasting. And so when I went home and I told my wife, she said, you said what? And so I called him back, and I did. And back to what Coach Osborne taught us and out on the farm, if I get my mind in a certain position where I'm going to try something, then I'm going to go all in, and I'm going to try to win. And so there were 3 candidates, and I just kept calling the executive producer. His name's Bill Galvin. And I said, Bill, I am not going to show up in Atlanta with no preparation. And he goes, well, it's not really fair for me, Trev, to tell you what you ought to be doing, because I'm not doing that with the other candidates. But it wouldn't be bad if you thought about this. And so the more I'd call him and press him, and so I did. I did a bunch of work, and ultimately I got the job, not because I was better than the other 2, but one was a 7-time All-Pro for the Bears. One was
Who was that?
Sean Gale.
Oh, sure. Man, he was there on the Bears that went to the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The other was Don Majkowski, who was the quarterback for the Packers.
Oh, okay.
And then there was me. I got the job because they offered me $30,000. And I think the other 2 were like,
I'm not going to take that. Yeah.
And I was like, I took the approach of saying, wait a minute, you're going to pay me $30,000 to talk about
have
football?
fun? Yeah.
I think I'll do it. And so ultimately that started it. And then I ended up doing that 11 years.
Cool.
Which then led to me at about 39, in 2008. Now I was working at CBS, and our kids were getting older.
But by the later years, they're paying more than $30,000 though, right?
Yes. Yes. And I probably didn't deserve it, but it's a different deal then. But I started getting to the point, is this what I'm doing with the rest of my life?
Yeah.
You know?
So how did the connection to UNO to become the athletic director happen then?
Well, the truth is, in 2008, I was working at CBS Sports Network, and Coach Osborne called and said, it looks like they're going to name me the athletic director in Lincoln, and have you ever thought about working in athletic administration? And I hadn't, because I didn't even know what that meant. I had no idea what all the people that, were serving us were doing. But, and so I told my wife, and she said, well, we were pretty ingrained in our church there and school, and you've been in the neighborhood for 11
Right.
years. My wife really enjoyed Marietta, Georgia is where we were. And, but I was getting really tired. I was flying.
A lot of travel.
I flew to New York every week in LaGuardia.
Fun airport.
Yeah, and then I did shows during the week, studio shows. I did an actual college football game on Saturday, and then I flew directly to an NFL game, and I did an NFL game on Westwood
So when
One
we were
Radio.
home?
2 days a week.
2 days a week, yeah.
And, now it wasn't year round, but our kids were getting involved in sports. And
yeah.
so Dad's never at any of it just really hurt me when my little Ashton said, why doesn't Dad come to my soccer games?
Yeah.
So I was kind of at that point where I was thinking, maybe I've got to think about something different. But kind of went through that process a little bit, but it didn't. It just didn't feel right, and so I did not come back. Went back to work at CBS, and in 2009, I'd always keep up to date with the Omaha
Right.
World Herald, Lincoln Journal-Star, all the sports writers, and I think it was Tom Chattel who wrote, another AD leaves UNO. It had 17 ADs in 30 years.
Holy cow.
Now some of that was interims.
Huh?
But and I knew UNO had an institution. I didn't know much about their athletic department, but I sent an email as a joke, frankly, to a friend who was mad at me that I didn't come to Lincoln. And 4 hours later, a Board of Regent member called and said, would you be interested in applying for the job? Because we can't get anybody to be interested. And I'm not the smartest guy in the world, Pete, but I should have been ding ding right there. If no one wants
Why
this
does nobody
job,
want this
why would I
job?
want this job?
Right.
But I started, we were really, I really wanted to get back to the Midwest, and I wanted our kids to be influenced by the work ethic and Midwestern,
Right.
Values and culture. And so my wife had softened a little bit at that point to family, and so went through the process with John Christensen, and ultimately was privileged to get hired there in 2009.
All right, so let's jump to one of the big decisions that you made as AD, which was to close down the football program and the wrestling program, and to really focus on hockey as a Division I sport. That could not have been an easy decision to make. Talk to me about who was a fan of that, who was not a fan of that. How did you make that decision? I think it's going to tie into some of our other conversations later on here. So,
well, you're going to see a common theme, I hope, is because I, very early on at UNO, and it's one of the things I always remind myself of, even here in Lincoln, this is not my athletic department.
right.
I happen
You're
to be
a steward
sitting in
for
the
a period
chair.
of time.
I'm a
Yeah.
steward for a period of time, just like, you in your role as a governor. And we're going to do the very best we can, not just for today, but to think about the future and to position this place to ensure that it's, viable long term. But, early on, we had a lot of financial problems, and there was a real disconnect with the academic side of the house and the athletic department.
And football's expensive, right?
Football is expensive, and the chief challenge is when we'd get our budget, it was voluntary support to athletics and involuntary support. and I said, so what's this involuntary? And so we had this massive deficit, and every year we were getting, quote, involuntary support, which is Nebraska taxpayer dollars. That's really what it is. So at a school like UNO, you have some self-generated revenue, but primarily at Division II, it's a subsidized vision. You're
Right.
using athletics in a way, and you'll have equivalent scholarships, so there is some tuition revenue generation to offset that. The problem with that vision, it works very well at a Missouri Western. It works very well at a Northwest Missouri State, where that's the only institution in that community.
Right.
People can really rally. It works very well at Kearney. That's an
It can,
institution that you can really. The market in Omaha is pretty tough.
Right.
When you've got the flagship institution 40 miles away, and you've got Creighton
University, yeah.
right there, so the market had sort of spoken that we just didn't have the type of support where the self-generated revenue was at a reasonable amount.
So how'd you pick hockey?
Well, hockey was the only existing Division I sport at that time.
Okay.
Hockey was so hockey
So
was
you said
started.
we're going to focus on that. Okay.
Right. So in 1996, when Don Leahy was the athletic director and Del Weber was the chancellor, they already were feeling the financial challenges and so the vision at that point when they went to the community and business leaders was, how do we, what you're always balancing is, it's okay to have subsidy in athletics, but what is the right mix? Like what is the right percentage? You know, what is there value behind the spend? And so what clearly the community had said, and our faculty, and even our students, was that we had gotten inverted. You know, we were only generating 40% self-generated and 60% was subsidized by taxpayer. And there was no vision to change that with rising expenses. That number was just going to grow. So Don Leahy and Del Weber started hockey to generate revenue to take pressure off the subsidized piece. So at the Civic Auditorium, 8,000 folks, you know, they generated, and hockey made money.
Oh, no kidding. Hockey made money.
And still does.
Yeah.
We lost profitability in hockey when hockey was moved to the Quest Center. And the challenge was you had a hard time leveraging your ticket when you had, you know, demand for 7,000 fans and you had supply of 17, 18,000.
Right.
And we had a rental expense that it literally took us to our knees, you know, of $50,000, $40-some thousand per game we played there. So we had to really rethink our business model. And so I went, and my first few months on the job, I'm trying to figure out Chancellor Christensen, our relationship.
And so when did you come to BAD? What was the year?
That was 2009.
2009, okay.
And so that was in March. My wife was mad at me. I didn't know that I didn't officially start until July 1st, the start of the fiscal year. So when I got hired, I got my car and I drove to Omaha.
Right.
And so I didn't get paid the first
sorry,
month and a half but I didn't know any different. I thought I was supposed to come to work.
You know, it's one of those things you're always supposed to ask in the interview, you know, Trev.
My wife gets so mad at me. I've signed more contracts that she has told me, as your counsel, I would not sign that contract.
I'm glad my wife's not an attorney.
So, but it was great. And then I said to John, define victory for me. I like to win. And he said, Trev, I need you to present me with a 25-year plan for financial stability in UNO athletics. And I didn't even know what that meant, and I'm not sure John knew what that meant. But I went back. We were still in an apartment at that point, 3 kids, a dog, and a bird. My wife is starting to question my sanity about taking this job. And I said, honey, we're in trouble. And she said, okay, well, what are you going to do? And I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ask for help from everybody in the community. And if at the end we kept our place in South Carolina, I said, if in the end there's no interest from business leaders and donors, then we can say they're not interested in UNO athletics, and that's fine. Yeah. But we can't solve our problem. She says, okay. So I didn't really know all the, I knew names, but there was one name I did know, and that was Warren Buffett. Mm-hmm. And I just decided I'm going to start at the top.
All right.
And so I reached out to ask for a meeting with him, and he responded through his secretary, but he wanted me to send a letter.
About what do you want to talk about?
About what we're going to talk about. Yeah. So I did that. And I want to just take a little side break here. This is one of the things that's the most unique about the state of Nebraska. And people like you, and I know you and I have talked about this previously, don't ever underestimate the impact that you in a leadership position make when you choose to take that meeting. Yeah. It doesn't mean that Warren Buffett just solved all our problems, but he gave me confidence to keep going. Yeah. And I think what's really unique about our state is if you are willing to ask for help and you go, the leadership, men and women in our state, will help you. They will help mentor you. Yeah. They will. So I met with him. I'll never forget going to the security desk at the Kiewit Center there, and I told the gentleman I have a meeting with, and I was so scared that I would mess this up. So I was literally 45 minutes early. I thought, gosh, what if I get a flat tire? Of course, we're 3 blocks from his office at UNO. But I get there, and I told the security guy that I have a meeting with Mr. Buffett, and he started laughing at me. Like, seriously. And I said, no, I really do. So he called up there and, okay. So, it was wonderful. I won't get into the details, but he could not have been more
Gracious.
Just gracious,
Yeah.
accommodating. He told me his story, he asked me my story, and then he made a recommendation to me. He said, I think you ought to reach out to Walter Scott. Didn't know who that was. So set up a meeting with him. And then ultimately, that's what led to all of it.
Didn't Walter at the time have an office in that same
He
building?
did. Yeah, he did. I spent a lot of time at the Kiewit building.
There you go.
And so was Ken Stinson and
Right.
others. And so I went to meet with him next, and I said, I need help. And he said, I will help you. And he asked me, but I'm interested in, will you have the courage to execute if we
Right.
run a good process?
Yeah.
Again, I'd never participated. And of course, my naive self
Well,
said,
of course I will.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But I had no idea, where we were going to go. And he didn't at the time either. But ultimately, what that led to was 12 years of mentorship. I can't possibly thank the Scott family more.
Yeah, that's cool.
He met with me every month, if not 2 to 3 times a month, Pete. Any problem I had, I would go, as long as I didn't complain.
Right.
There's no complaining, no whining.
Right.
Just, these are the
Yeah.
facts.
Don't bring me problems, bring me solutions.
Yep.
Right.
So we went through a period of, and he said, I'm going to create a committee, and we're going to start working on this. And I said, okay. And so he came up with a committee, and
So who was all on that committee?
so Ken Stinson, Dana Bradford, late Jim Young, and then JB was the president at that time, and so he was occasionally in there, and basically me.
Okay.
It was very small, and my job each week, they gave me assignments, is each week I made a presentation in the boardroom. Most of it financially driven,
Right.
creating uses and sources document. And you remember, we didn't have a CFO at UNO Athletics. I had never had a secretary in 12 years.
Oh, no kidding.
So we were as lean of an operation as we could because we had to. We had no resources. And I was very cognizant of the fact that any person we hired was essentially like me going in my neighborhood and saying, are you okay? Would you give me some more taxpayer money?
Right.
Because I need help. And
Right.
so I was very, very concerned about that. And so we went to work, and we spent almost 16 months, and we went through everything. We first looked at, should we get rid of the entire athletic department? So the other thing that I was doing while we were doing this is I had a 3-ring binder of putting information, because you remember, a lot of these leaders didn't know anything about things like Title IX.
Right.
They don't understand anything about core sport requirements in the NCAA or core sport requirements in your conference. I mean, at one point, and I won't say who, looked at the uses and sources document and said, this is going to be easy and quick. We're going to drop every sport but hockey.
It's like, well,
Well, that's not possible.
Yeah.
You can't. And so we were, I was advocating and educating as we went. But we looked at, should we drop sports entirely? And the quick feeling was we would be the first and only public university in the nation with over 10,000 students that didn't sponsor sports to the NCAA. So that didn't take long. Then
That one got written off pretty quickly.
yeah, that got written off pretty quickly.
So
Then
basically, what is the mix of sports, given the restraints,
Right.
the requirements to have certain sports and so forth? What was the best mix? Is that really what you're looking at then?
Then we were looking at, can we remain at Division II with all of our sports, keep hockey or keep football, keep wrestling, but regain profitability in hockey? And we went down that path because that included, of course, what ultimately led to Baxter Arena,
Right.
which was regaining profitability. The problem with that is that was a 5-year vision.
Right.
You would immediately regain profitability. But then in the end, the expenses of Division II subsidize all those programs is going to outrun your ability to self-generate the hockey revenue. And we were trying to create a long-term vision. So then we went to Division I. And it was, how do we proactively, and the university was pretty clear that, listen, you can do whatever you want, but you just can't demand,
More money.
3 times
Yeah.
the state subsidy.
Right.
So we were trying to fit this vision in, and what we found, what was amazing, was back to your earlier comment about excellence across the board. What was really hard for us is when you have one program that's Division I, you really have a choice. You're either going to run the whole department like it's Division I,
Right.
or you're going to run the whole department like it's Division II.
Right.
Well, part of
Which means if you're a hockey team that is everything else is being run like Division II, your hockey team's not going to be that good.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And part of the requirements of Division I, Pete, was you have to have a compliance department. You have to invest in these core areas.
Yeah.
And so what I was able to show, and we could walk through together, was we're already investing in some of the core areas for one sport that we're not going to have a significant additional investment if the rest were Division I. And so as we move forward, what the challenge was that the NCAA had, because schools like the one I'm at now, were against all these schools moving to Division I. So they created a 4-year moratorium to stop schools from transitioning to Division I. Because the reason why we all transitioned to Division I is we were trying to get at self-generated revenue like NCAA men's basketball tournament. And so the more schools that are Division I, the more dilutes the pie that's being sent out. So the strategy on the larger schools at that time was to say, you cannot move to Division I unless you have a certifiable offer from a conference. So that limits the number of people who can go. Because what was happening is schools would say, we're going to go to Division I. They couldn't get into a conference and they're wandering around. So there's really only 2 options for us, 3 kind of. But you had the Missouri Valley Conference that Creighton was in at the time. Well, that wasn't realistic because our budget, Missouri Valley Conference wasn't interested in UNO. You had the Horizon League that had some, tepid interest, but they were, they're way over in Wisconsin and the travel costs. And then there was this Summit League, which was interesting. Many of our former peers at Division II had moved up to Division I, the Dakota schools, and you had Oral Roberts and Western Illinois and some of those programs. And in diving into their budgets, even ours was pretty well in line. The challenge was we had to get an invite from them. And the way our sport offerings were set up, we had hockey, we had football, we had wrestling. None of those sports were offered in the Summit League. So what the commissioner was telling me at the time is your women's sports are aligned great, Trev. Yeah. But you only have 3 men's sports that are aligned with the Summit League. So we don't really fit. And there was other schools that are trying to there was an open spot because the school left. And so this was part of the decision making too, is that so that's why we started men's soccer, men's golf, is now we had 5 sports to align. We then football was costing about $1.4 million a year, mostly taxpayer dollars. We didn't have a lot of attendance. Obviously we don't have television revenue. And so, again, we did all that research. If we moved to Division I, we're probably going to have to double what that budget was. So we used the savings in those sports
to start the other ones.
To lift the other one, to lift the rest of the department. So we saved $1.9 million, spent $500,000 in the other 2, and used those resources to invest in the students and some of the ancillary support units to bring it to Division I.
All right, so Trev, you spent a lot of time talking about how you got here, but
sorry, that was convoluted.
That was long, Trev. So, hey, just so you know, this podcast is only supposed to be an hour that long, just so you know.
Well, we can cut it.
Yeah.
It's,
It is videotaped. Good point. So, but what I want to get into is, how did you go out and sell that thing? Because there were people who thought that was a good idea, obviously the people who were on your committee, but there was also people who said, oh my gosh, you're getting rid of UNO football. You can't do that. Or did you find that people were like, yeah, you're right, you should get rid of UNO football? Was it a pretty easy sell?
I would say, we couldn't sell it prior to the announcement, and that was part of the problem.
Right.
And that was the real challenge.
You couldn't leak that, right?
We couldn't.
Yeah.
And I would tell you that I don't think...
I had the same problem with the canal here.
Yeah.
Couldn't announce it ahead of time.
Yeah.
The legislature's like, what? What's this about?
Yeah. Right. And I would tell you that I didn't do a very good job of communicating it post. Mm-hmm. But part of the strategy and the reason why, and the same thing we're going to do here and have been doing here, is I knew that I needed to have a core group of leaders that when asked, hey, what do you think of UNO? I needed people like Jim Young, a UNO grad, to say, I am aware of the decision. I think it's the right decision. Yeah. And very quickly you get the support of, and we knew that there were going to be people that no matter what, we're never going to. But could have done a lot better job, Pete. Mm-hmm. There was no playbook.
But it was a courageous decision at the time, and it worked out really, really well. I mean,
I
know hockey's been to the Frozen Four. We obviously get great programs that come to Omaha to play hockey. I mean, it's really become a big part of the community.
Yeah, it's worked out well. And, one of the things that we tried to do and think differently about, Pete, is at that level, at UNO, if you have a singular vision of just wins and losses, right, it really falls short. You have to use the athletic department as a tool to help grow the public institution and ultimately serve the community. That was the change in vision. Yeah. And so where UNO was trying to grow enrollment, we have 17 high school, I still say we. I mean, UNO will always be a part of me. I love that place. But 17 high school graduations in Omaha happen in Baxter Arena.
That's cool.
Getting exposed to the UNO brand and helping to partner with. And John was a great partner. And we took the approach of saying, hey, we're still trying to win, don't get me wrong, but how do we activate the athletic department as a tool to really put the entire institution? We changed the brand. We created some unity of purpose. That we eliminated the bad. Here's what I did, Pete. So I went to our team and the whole athletic department. They couldn't stand the people on the academic side. Well, they don't support us and they don't like us. And so I asked our team in an all-staff meeting, who's the largest donor to the UNO athletic department? And, you'd come up with the names. Your name might have come up. I don't remember. And I said, you're all wrong. It's Dr. B.J. Reed, the Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs. Because he controls that budget.
Right.
And you know what we're going to do? We're going to start treating him like a donor.
Right, exactly.
And so we got him a shirt. We brought him to hockey games. And all of a sudden, we started really working on that relationship and bringing people together. And it was a game changer.
Yeah.
And so now the faculty, and then, of course, we inverted the now UNO's self-generating 60% and they're subsidized 40%. And that was the vision, is how can we create value around that subsidy? So, I think that there'll always be challenges there. There's always at that level going to be resource challenges. But UNO's on a great trajectory.
Cool. So that led to then becoming the athletic director at University of Nebraska-Lincoln. So how did that all come out?
Yeah, so
A shorter version, okay?
My wife always tells me, you talk way too much. I'm sorry. It's
don't worry. My wife tells me that too. Don't worry about it.
we spent 12 years
we do
there.
need to keep it tight.
Yeah. Well, we were on our way to South Carolina for a vacation when we got the news that Nebraska had made a change, and I'd communicated to several donors and others all along that, listen, I love the University of Nebraska. I'd have been happy to be at UNO the rest of my career.
Yeah.
I felt I worked at the University of Nebraska. You know my strengths, you know my weaknesses. I'm perfectly imperfect, but if I can help in any other way, I'm happy to help. And ultimately that led to some conversation with Chancellor Green, and felt like there was some alignment and fit. And Ted Carter was a big part of that too. And so between Chancellor Green and President Carter, I really thought there was some alignment there that we could get some really good things done.
All right. Good deal.
Yeah.
Well, obviously you made tough decisions at UNO. Now you got tough decisions to make here, or have made tough decisions at University of Nebraska. Specifically, obviously volleyball is going along swimmingly well. Coach Cook does a great job.
No tough decisions there.
No tough decisions there, but you got tough stuff going on in the basketball program. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the thing that's making all the headlines right now is the football program. Mm-hmm. And, you mentioned about how UNO had 17, including interim athletic directors in 30 years or something. Mm-hmm. But, obviously we've had turnover in the athletic department, the AD position, but also in the coaching position. So talk a little bit about kind of where do you see we are with Husker football right now, and where do we go from here?
Well, it's a great question, and we're still seeking to define that. I think I'm a strong believer in this. Athletic directors and the administrators run the athletic department. Coaches coach and coaches recruit. And I think that's part of why you've seen all that turnover, is we've lost our identity on who plays what role, and you have a unified vision around that. But we're in a tough spot with football, Pete. I think we need to be honest with ourselves.
3-9 last year, we're 1-3 this year.
We part of, and this is part of what I learned through this process, is you have to have the courage to examine the realities of your current situation, and we need to recognize that. We're at the bottom. We got a long ways to go. But I'm really optimistic about is the fact that as I think about the future, I think about where we are as an institution. First of all, God bless our fan base, Pete. And I know you're strong. Part of it. But
385 sellouts now? Is that what we're up to?
Yeah, and in spite of what that records look like, I sat there in the Georgia Southern game after we've given up 700 yards. Yeah. And 600, yeah. And it's late in the fourth quarter, and there's all these people still there. And so we have this fan base. We have the Go Big project coming online this summer, $165 million project.
Still obviously support for that from the Nebraskans to build that, right?
A tremendous amount of support. The Big Ten media rights deal. We just announced our new MMR deal, which is $300 million over the next 15 years, which will be one of, if not the richest deal from college athletics. So we have it all.
But you got to go out and get a coach, right? Mickey Joseph is one of your candidates, I presume?
Yeah, I mean, we're
So-
supporting Mickey as much as we can, and
But you're going to go also look at outside,
we have to.
right? So how do you sell that prospective candidate on coming to Nebraska? Like, what's your sales pitch to say, hey, you want to come here?
Well, there's a couple things that are beyond anything we've done that have naturally and organically happened that I think position us well. With some of the changes in the media rights deal, there's a couple conferences that have separated themselves a little bit, Pete, from the other
Big Ten
conferences.
being one of them, yeah.
Big Ten and the SEC, just based on resources. So,
Yeah.
coaches and agents aren't naive to
Right.
about 30, 35 jobs that allow them the opportunity. Not all coaches
Right.
are drawn to that,
Right.
So I think we have an opportunity there. I think the other thing that we have is an opportunity is, I think this is the first time in a long time when we've had a transition where there hasn't been all kinds of, you could argue whether or not we should have made the change when we did, but I don't think you have a divided fan base over whether a faint change could have happened. There's not a lot of politics involved. You're not walking into a situation where 9 wins isn't enough.
Right. Well, I mean, here's the thing. Like, I'm just talking from a fan standpoint now. I think fans in Nebraska really wanted Scott Frost to be successful.
So
He's
did
a
I.
hometown, right? Like, he's from Nebraska. He gets our culture. But for whatever reason, he wasn't able to put wins on the record. And that's part of what you have to do, right? You have to win games. You want to develop fine young men, but you also have to win football games, and you don't get to do one without the other. So you got to win, and it just, whatever for the reason, it just wasn't happening. And that's so I don't think that there's a lot of people who are saying, yeah, this was, something that wasn't going to happen.
Well, we were all in. We wanted Scott to be successful. That was the ultimate objective when I started a year and a half ago. And but as you know, you've run successful organizations, and even the governor's office. At the end of the day, there has to be accountability.
Yeah, and making personal change is tough.
Yeah.
All right, so here's a question, though, I do hear, is why didn't you wait and save yourself, $15 million or $7 million, what the number was?
It's a great question, and what I started seeing, and particularly in our state, Pete, when that kind of scrutiny and challenge comes on the head coach, it's unavoidable in this state that it all goes on the kids and students. And I have a particular interest in those young people only because I lived it too, and I interact with them, and I see it on their face, and I watch it. And you got to understand, a lot of these young people, they're not going to go play in the NFL. This is it for them. This is their window.
Right.
And, with 9 games left in the season, I genuinely, and I still do, believe that there's an opportunity for them to experience, there's been a lot of hard work that's gone in there. And I just didn't think it was fair to them. And, the other thing is, the reality is, right, wrong, or indifferent, years ago, the university made a commitment. And, to Scott and signed him to a contract. And at the end of the day, the university lives up to their commitments. And so there was a lot of thought into that, Pete, and I understand both sides. I just chose at the end to think, and my recommendation to the president was, for the benefit of the students, let's give them an opportunity with 9 games left to try to salvage something this season. And I know what we look like against Oklahoma. Kind of unfair to Mickey in 4 days to
First
say,
series
hey, go
was
fix
really
it.
good.
First, I was living the high life, 7 minutes. But now with 2 weeks off, we'll see what happens. I mean, we've played 1 conference game.
Yeah. So
So we have an opportunity here, and I would really love to see those young men get a chance to savor success.
I'll editorialize a little bit too, because on a point that you didn't mention, but one of the ways I see that is like, look, Scott struggled last year. He was struggling this year. You want to make personal decisions. Like, if you're going to be running an organization, you want to make personal decisions quickly, right? You want to be, slow in your consideration, but fast when you made a decision. And I think it actually says to the rest of the world that, hey, we weren't going to draw this out and nickel and dime a state hero. Scott's a state hero. We're not going to nickel and dime a state hero when it's clear that this is not a fit for either one of us anymore. We're going to make the decision, and we know it's going to cost us money, but we're going to do the right thing. And I think I thought that was a great message to send, frankly.
That's exactly what I thought, Pete, is when the decision's made, is it really fair to let the kids and the coach just slip in the wind for the next month and a half so that we can say, we were able to. But on the other side, I understand people's perspective. It is a lot of money. It's a gross amount of money, and it's unfortunate. But that was my decision, too.
Yeah. So what's the process to find the new coach?
Well, I'm talking to a lot of people. The great thing is, I got a lot of AD colleagues, and just walking through some of the process they went through, it's been very helpful. I have talked to a couple sitting head coaches not to try to hire them here, guys I got a lot of respect for who've really built. When I look at our job right now, Pete, this is, you think back across the history, Tom Osborne built this infrastructure. Frank inherited it. But as we go forward, we need to find a coach that has expertise and understanding of how to build a football culture and infrastructure that's sustainable.
Yeah.
No more short-term visions around immediate, obviously we need to have success. But I think there are coaches out there, and there's more than one, that have a good track record of building, when the program was at the bottom, and who haven't just built it, at a low level. Maybe they've built it here, then they've built it at a BCS level. So there's a track record, and there's no guarantee in these jobs,
right.
but we've just been busy focused on 2 pages of what are our values, what do we believe in, how do we want to operate, what do we want this thing to look like.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
Start with the end in
I
mind.
tell all of our coaches, you just need to put it, you don't have to win every game, but you better put a product on the field, the court, the pool, the track that is reflective of what Nebraskans believe in.
Yeah.
Meaning, they play together, they play for each other, they
Right.
play hard, they're fundamentally sound, they're disciplined, they're tough, and they never ever quit.
Yeah.
And so we'll have interest. We do have interest. We also want to see, we want to support Mickey and see how that transpires. But the hard part about this is, I know there was a lot of angst about the number of days, when Steve Peterson, this will be the longest search in the history of Nebraska athletics, merely because of, the coaches that you're interested in talking to are in the middle of their season.
They got day jobs right now.
And those coaches that are in the middle of their season, that are 3-0 or whatever, that are if they call now, I'd have less interest in them only because. So we'll see how it transitions, but
Yeah.
we'll have a great group of people that'll help as well.
Well, it reminds me, I invested in a defense company one time. It was run by a bunch of Top Gun fighter pilots. And I was having dinner with one night. They're like, oh, yeah, we never wanted to go to a high-performing squadron. What are you going to do with that? We wanted to go to one of the worst-performing squadrons and turn it around so we can make a name for ourselves. So I think that's the kind of attitude you want to have from somebody who's going to take this job.
Somebody will see this as just a diamond in the rough and an incredible opportunity, because we talked about our fan base. I often sit there and look out at that fan base, and I think to myself, can you imagine if we were good? I mean, this place would be bonkers, Pete.
Yeah, no kidding.
And the right person who believes in development, who believes in building and culture and all of those things, I think will jump at this opportunity. And that's the kind of person you want, somebody who sees this as an incredible opportunity, because I think it is.
Yeah, cool. So we're kind of running out of time, but there's a couple other topics I want to hit. Maybe I'll combine them together. Talk to me about, because I think they do impact each other. Talk to me about, where do you see it going with name, image, likeness, NIL, and the transfer portal? How is that going to impact college football, and where's that going?
They'll both have some transition to them. I think ultimately part of the challenge is the two of them are not disconnected. There's this very concern about the legal challenges around collusion, and that's what's really impacted it. But I think first and foremost, we have to somehow get our hands around this unlimited freedom of movement.
Right.
You can't possibly, it's not in the best interest of the student athletes.
Well, it means you could have a different team every year.
That's right. And there needs
how
to...
do you start playing for each other if you've got different people in every position every year?
Well, I mean, you have a hard time building a culture.
Yeah.
And I think, so that's part of it. On the NIL thing, I think you're going to continue down the path we're going right now until we get either the courts to decide or NIL gets taken in-house. A lot of our donors have said, hey, listen, we love to support NIL. We just rather deal with the university, though, because there's less risk there than there is. And so part of what we've done, part of our MMR deal is there's an NIL component to it that contributes to that. So we've got a couple pieces of infrastructure in place that if indeed the rules change and you can take it in-house, I think ultimately the two of them will be connected where, when you get an NFL contract, I mean, the NFL has a lot better situation right now than college football.
Yeah.
I mean, at least there's a contract and there's expectations. But until we can somehow figure out, what that compensation looks like, nobody denies that eventually they're going to get paid. The question is when and how much.
Yeah.
And by the way, if we're going to pay football players,
how do you play guards?
Well, not only that,
Oh, then
but
everybody
whatever
else too, yeah.
you're going to be paying on the female side, the
Yeah,
same
Title
equivalent.
IX, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And so that's why we've been so singular focused on our business model, because the better we run our business, the less of an impact and the less pain it'll have if, for say, by chance a certain portion of distribution from the Big Ten is decreased because it needs to go to pay for name, image, and likeness. How are we gonna run our business operations in that respect?
You're worried that college football programs become the minor league for the NFL, that it becomes professionalized that way?
I think there is some of that concern, but I think the toothpaste is out of the tube, Pete.
Yeah.
We're not putting it back in, and so and we own that. The NCAA, the members, we own that. We didn't get ahead of this, and ultimately the courts have dictated some of this stuff to us. So, I think the courts will continue to dictate. I mean, there's a real concern at the conference levels about coming out with any sort of, okay, here's what's going to happen. We're going to do this because it'll be challenged in court and we'll lose. Many of us, athletic directors, have our approach is, well, we're already losing.
Right.
Let's try a different strategy and take our
Right.
chances. But it is a time of fundamental change, and it will feel different. But I think with the right leader in football, I think with the right culture builder, and with the N, I think we can maintain those things that are very near and dear to our alumni and fan base. There will be some professional components to it. I mean, you're already seeing some of it. Our players are out doing commercials.
Right.
Doesn't seem to be the end of the world. But we just need to have some controls around it, because there's nothing right now.
Yeah. It's Wild West.
Yep.
All right. So anything that we didn't cover that you would have liked to hit upon?
Well, I think we really ought to go back to that whole process. I'm so sorry.
Really? Because we spent a lot of time on it, Trev. Just saying.
Well, just cut all that out. No, I appreciate you, Pete, for the leadership you've done for our state. And I think,
well, thanks. Team effort, like we were talking about.
yeah,
It's team
no,
effort.
I mean, this is a great state.
Yep,
And,
we got the best place in the
tough
world.
It is. And the University of Nebraska has benefited from the relationship with you and the legislature. And so we're going to keep working hard and ensure that this is still a great place to live and work and have your young people educated.
All right,
So,
great. Well, Trev, thanks very much. Appreciate you joining me here.
Thank you.
And best of luck as you go through the transitions you're going through. I know you've made tough decisions in the past, so I know you'll do a good job with these as well. And, I think I've had my season tickets for about 25 years now, so I'm excited to see where the program's going to go, moving forward. And
Thank
hopefully we can pull out a few more wins this year yet.
That's the goal.
All right.
Appreciate it, Pete.
Great. Well, again, folks, thank you very much for joining us on another episode of the Nebraska Way. You can, follow us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all that sort of great stuff. We're at Gov Ricketts. Obviously, total shameless self-promotion. Go give us a 5-star rating so we can get more people on. That would be great. You can always email me at pete.ricketts@nebraska.gov. And we look forward to seeing you again on another episode of the Nebraska Way.
Paid for by Pete Ricketts for Governor, 1610 N Street, Suite 100, Lincoln, Nebraska 68508.